if I sent off an autonomous agent to go off and fail 500 times in order to build something, that's quite difficult in a compliance space.
Welcome to Digital Customer Communications Regulated, where we explore how regulated firms engage, retain and protect their customers at scale. This week, we're joined by Mark Watson, CTO at ComplyAdvantage, AI-driven RegTech, helping over 500 banks, fintechs and crypto firms fight financial crime. Mark shares what it's really like to build with AI in regulated industries, moving past buzzwords to compliance, trust and real value. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Sam.
Very good to have you with us today. With a name like Watson, it feels like you were destined to be in AI. How did you start getting involved with the tech?
Well, I guess I started my career at IBM, which was founded by Thomas Watson, which is why they use the Watson brand for their AI. So I think that's pure coincidence. And I certainly never got any benefit from being called Watson at IBM. I've been working with machine learning related technology since probably around 2013, 2014 in different aspects of business as it's kind of entered software engineering. That has graduated now into AI-based systems, largely around these large language models which have emerged. And it's just been something that I think which has entered everybody's perception in the same way that other technologies have, probably quite gradually, but in particular for disruptive companies, for startups, because they have the opportunity far more so than an IBM, than a lot of the traditional companies, to build stuff new using the latest technologies rather than build it from scratch.
And there is a lot of excitement around AI at the moment. It's kind of, as you say, if you've been in it, it might have felt more gradual, the move from machine learning to LLMs, etc. But for everyone else, it seems to be the big thing. So with that comes a lot of hype, excitement, and also the realistic gains. How do you separate those, the hype from the actual real benefits today?
Well, I think there's a genuine step change in what was machine learning is now AI capability with the introduction of large language models. As the name implies, they can process a large amount of natural language. So previously, for what we do, we would have been using natural language processing models, which were typically trained by data scientists. These new large language models, new in the sense of they're kind of based on technology that was introduced around 2017, but have kind of taken time to become productized. These new models are far more capable of processing a large amount of language. That's used a lot in computing. It's used a lot in data processing. And so they're far more effective, and there is a genuine step change in their capabilities.
So can you dive a little bit deeper in terms of how you're using AI at ComplyAdvantage for someone perhaps who's not in RegTech and compliance every day?
Well, we use it in a bunch of places. I mean, we use it inside the product. We use it within our engineering function. We use it within our productivity functions, which is, I guess, what as an adjunct to email and stuff like that, which is, I think, what most people kind of experience. Inside the product, as an example, and I talked about those natural language processing models, we probably had about 40 models in production 2 years ago, all trained machine learning models. They would take about 6 weeks to retrain. They would be processing things like adverse media. So large numbers of journalistic articles looking for mentions of risk, looking for association of individuals with criminal activities and so on. Those models would take about 6 weeks to retrain. A large language model takes less than an hour, doesn't require a data scientist. And, so most of those models have now been replaced. We process, in terms of scale, we process probably about 8 million articles a day just for adverse media. And that's just one of our sources of data. And ComplyAdvantage is unusual in the market in terms of not buying data from elsewhere, but actually kind of sourcing our own data. So that area is very important to us. And we have other uses as well, which I'm sure we'll get onto during the rest of this conversation.
Those are huge efficiencies. With huge efficiencies come, I guess, the law of moving faster than you should. In an area like risk, you'd be well aware of this. I'm sure you've seen plenty of projects fail and succeed in your time, but what makes a good AI project, a good tech project succeed by moving fast, but not sort of faster than you should?
Yeah, I think that's the key, actually, Sam. Just in terms of when people ask me about how to make these product use is successful, I think there's probably two key precepts. One is you can only go at the speed of the technology itself. So a lot of the hype is about, for example, the models being able to write computer code, for agentic software to be autonomous because it can write its own code and generate its modules. That's not what we're seeing from the capability of the current models right now. So another use of AI within our system is for what are termed agentic workflows. So the ability to effectively orchestrate a process using a series of AI models that hand off between each other. In the medium term, those are going to be able to, if they see a problem, generate code on the fly, generate capabilities on the fly to be able to solve that problem. They can't do that right now. So that means you can use those agentic workflows for very deterministic problems. In compliance, that will be at the level of a level 1 help desk analyst. You can automate their role. You can't automate more difficult problems that they might encounter, so you still need humans around in the process. And you can't automate the activity of a level 2 analyst who will be dealing with more complicated problems. So in order to be successful with that project, you need to basically focus on what is the current capability of the technology. The other capabilities will come along, but they're not ready yet. So don't get too far over your skis. I think the other advice I would give would be to just measure everything relentlessly. One of the things we do in our engineering function is just measure everything. We measure time spent on various things to make sure we're not being distracted and working on the wrong thing. We measure the performance of the things that we develop. We measure when they go wrong. We automate all the activity around that. That has helped a lot with deployment of our AI systems, allowed us to do it far more quickly than possibly would have been the case otherwise. So just good engineering practice has, massively helped in terms of getting to market quickly with AI capabilities.
Yeah. So you're using it both internally and within your product. You're also a critical partner for some very important organizations, big banks, fintechs, as well as some startups, etc. Being that close to these businesses, you must have an idea of where else AI is having the most impact within the financial services or within regulated sectors. Where do you see it, I guess, at the market level having the most impact right now?
Yeah, I mean, to go back to what I said about these kind of workflows that you can automate, what happens in compliance is typically compliance tools are very focused on risk and not letting anything through, and therefore they tend to over-index on what is likely risk. That generates a lot of what are called false positives, which then have to be handled somewhere. So if you were to send money on Revolut or TransferWise or Wise rather, sometimes you'll get this feedback, this is a risky transaction, it's going to be checked somewhere. When you sign up for a credit card or an account with these companies, they're obliged to go off and check things about you before giving you an account. If for some reason, Mark Watson, the regular guy, is confused with Mark Watson, the criminal, that will fall into some kind of help desk process. So all these companies are running very large help desks, which are of finite size and cost a lot of money. Most of the problems they're solving are fairly simple. They go through, do a bunch of research and so on, figure out whether this is really a true positive and release the transaction, or hand off to another process and then have to write a report. Most of those things can be automated fairly simply. So the biggest impact right now is probably reducing the size of a lot of those help desks through automation. And that has a significant economic impact on these companies, really from, small through mid to large size companies. A lot of them are spending a large amount of money doing call handling. And that's why you've seen, in the last 5 years, the rise of all these chatbots on websites trying to get you to chat to something which probably isn't that good to try and solve your problems with retail and so on. But the new systems are very effective in terms of just dealing with the problem in the background and reducing the amount of noise for the customer around compliance issues.
And there is always that tension between compliance and I just want my life to be easy as a customer. We've seen, as those efficiencies have come about with chatbots, new regulation in financial services also come into play, like consumer duty, to try and put a net in place for, say, vulnerable people. That also plays its part, but can introduce friction at the end user level as well. So how do you see that balance between making things quick and easy and the kind of regulatory compliance push for transparency? How do you see it playing out? To me, it seems like those things are much more, they're converging, they're coming closer together and working together a lot more easily than perhaps in the past.
Yeah, I think that the requirements are the requirements, and you have to be able to honour them. So the fundamental thing you have to do, whether it's in software or whether using a bank of human beings or combining the two, which is really the approach right now. I don't see kind of, for example, in this automatic case remediation systems, right now, you're not seeing the human function entirely being replaced. You're seeing some kind of augmentation through some helpers coming in to help the humans, just because of the obligations can't be totally satisfied through automation. And there is actually, there's everything also has to be explainable to the regulator. If the regulator comes along and says, why did you make that decision? You need a full log of it. So we can't go into some kind of black box, take a decision, emit the decision, and kind of go on the basis of it. So the kind of fundamentals of compliance still apply right across the piece, and you have to be able to satisfy those. It's just the case that better technology is helping some of that to be automated, but not all of it.
Yeah. I saw you talk a lot on your website about Kaizen, the Kaizen approach. Obviously, culture plays its part in the adoption of new tech. And there are some things in culture that you can't really put your finger on, why X company culture is better than Y. But are there any things in particular that you've seen around, how you work, continuous improvement, things like that, how you show up when you're building this tech, that make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, again, it comes back to, the key thing is the culture. I think within technology teams, it is very important to have a kind of technology-oriented culture that understands the technology you're dealing with rather than is just deploying stuff. And so we spend a lot of time within our team on education. We have kind of internal blogging. All of the senior engineers are expected to write, explain, educate, as well as just build stuff, and they have time set aside for that. We have all of the engineers have learning and development funding. So that's not specific to AI. Obviously, AI, everybody's interested in that right now. I think it's important for people's careers as well, that they understand that technology. But having a culture which embraces technology, the idea of technology, better understands technology, allows you to far more facility to deploy it. The Kaizen thing for us is really about not making grand, dangerous leaps, but continuously iterating on the basis of what we see and what we measure. And the measurement is a very important part of this kind of feedback loop of building software.
I think one of the big cultural differences at the moment is that no one feels like they're keeping up fast enough, or there is this sense in which the world is moving so fast that if we are only looking inwards, we're not innovating and we're not keeping up. Agentic AI is something that I've not really got to grips with yet, but I know it's on the horizon. It's one of the buzzwords of the year. I know you've talked about it before. Can you give us an idea of the difference between agentic and LLMs that we've seen over the last couple of years and how it's being used in compliance?
Yeah, so agentic AI is really it's a way of building and deploying software which combines a lot of techniques from machine learning and AI. So you would typically run a series of AI modules, which probably that capability is probably provided by a series of LLMs, which are prompted, and run them in a chain. And then the second thing in the chain takes account of the result of the first thing. So you're chaining these modules together. The fundamental idea behind agentic AI ultimately is that these packages of capabilities become themselves autonomous as agents, that they can identify problems rather than just be sent off against a particular purpose, that they can learn towards goals, that they will be able to build their own pieces of software. They're not capable of that right now, as I said. They're capable of fairly kind of deterministic work chains. You probably see over the next 2 years them build out those capabilities. So, I guess my advice when thinking about that technology is, you used the phrase fast enough earlier. Enough is probably the key word in that rather than fast. You have to run at the speed of what the technology is capable of doing with a relatively low degree of risk. if I sent off an autonomous agent to go off and fail 500 times in order to build something, that's quite difficult in a compliance space. So, but yeah, agentic we're really at the start of right now of agentic software in terms of what it's capable of. Very important when you think about where the agentic stuff is going is it can't achieve any of that without access to data. Otherwise, it's just really kind of the dumb chatbot that you see on a website that doesn't know anything about you, doesn't know anything other than the conversations that you're currently having, and so on. So we spend a lot of time on data. We think probably the amount of data that we need to have in the system probably needs to be several hundred times greater than it is at the moment in order to feed the reasoning of those agents. And so we're investing a lot in building out our data capabilities as well. And we have something called an intelligence graph, which kind of you feed in information to it, and it acts as kind of a risk detective following all the connections between the pieces of data. By building all those connections right now, for every facts that we feed into it, it infers another 4 facts and then feeds them back into the system. That ratio isn't fixed. So the more data you feed into it, the greater the multiple of data that's inferred from those connections. That basically forms the brain for what agentic is doing and forms the brain and the memory for it. Without that, it's just a voice. So all of those things need to come together for kind of the promise of all this technology to genuinely work in terms of solving complex problems in a reasonable and consistent way, as opposed to just automating very strict workflows, which is kind of, I think, where the technology is at the moment.
Yeah, and there is, it seems, a chasm between what you're talking about, which is advanced capability with quite a lot of investment and resource put into it, consideration of risk, etc. And oh god, it's really easy to just string loads of these things together and start putting stuff in and getting stuff out. I think that's probably the biggest gap for businesses when they're looking at this stuff. It's how do I get the buy-in? Okay, we can say, oh, we can probably do this kind of stuff. I've run a little experiment. How do you think about buy-in for these types of changes, especially when you're trying to sell in the risk aversion piece as well?
So what's also important for compliance is just having a consistent explanation of what's gone on. One of the problems is if you combine a whole bunch of tools, which may seem tempting at the outset, is when you go back and look for the explanation, which you need a record of. Part A of the explanation is over in that tool, part B is over in that tool, part C is over in that tool, and you're left having to assemble those things together. And also those decisions may overlap. Tool A may have taken one decision, tool B may want to take part of tool A's decision and gone off and relitigated the data elsewhere and looked at the decision in a different light. So increasingly as these tools come out, it becomes more and more difficult to kind of combine them together. We've taken a single platform approach where everything is based on the same set of data. It gives you a consistent audit trail of what's gone on. That audit trail is immutable in the sense of it can't be changed or deleted once it's in the system. And it's all based on the same reasoning and set of data. So I think that's increasingly important in an age of proliferation of new small tools that are coming along and trying to exploit these bits of technology.
Would that be your best piece of advice for that? We have lots of financial advice businesses and lots of financial providers that listen to this podcast. For those people within those businesses who want to get started with building with AI, especially around risk and compliance, would that be your best piece of advice, or do you have any other advice for them?
Yeah, I think, the advice you can draw from what I just said is kind of start from the end of the process and work back. The end of the process is I've got a report, and the report makes sense and it's complete and it will satisfy kind of regulatory oversight. The other part of it is really, I think, to have a plan that probably makes certain assumptions over a 12 to 18 month period, because the technology is going to change significantly over that period. And there is a danger of not necessarily being left behind. It's not kind of a FOMO position in particular for these kinds of businesses, but there is a danger of the technology where it is today is underneath going to change a fair bit, and so you need to be able to track that and prepare for it, and rather than be kind of drawn along on the tide.
Great advice, and I think we need to let you go soon, but one last question that I can't help but ask you before we do let you go. Do you have any thoughts on AGI? Where are we on that that curve? Any predictions?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I think the big change is the big issues driving AGI and the likelihood of AGI are the same ones that are driving just kind of current use of the technology, which is to what extent do the capabilities have access to data, memory, knowledge, reasoning in order to take decisions. And secondly, it is going to come down to the ability of these modules effectively to write code on the fly. Right now, they don't write reliable code, in our experience, on the fly. We use it in engineering as well as in product, and we very much adopt a policy of trust but verify with that code. It certainly hasn't replaced any engineers from our point of view, although it has given us a lot of productivity enhancements. But yeah, until the models can reliably write code to solve problems, you're not going to get AGI, and we can't see that yet. But, who knows what's going to happen in the next year or so.
We'll see. Well, thank you so much for your time. Where can we find you and ComplyAdvantage online if people want to get in touch?
ComplyAdvantage.com, and you can just go to our website, read all about the products, read all about our announcements, and also get in contact with us there.
Great stuff. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for your time today. Mark Watson, we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Sam. Take care.